Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live, and everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this?" She said to him, "Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one coming into the world." Yet again, we have another long passage from John as our gospel text this morning. And it is absolutely stunning. In our text today, we have Jesus not in Judea, not near Jerusalem, but out probably in Galilee. And he gets a message from two of his friends, Mary and Martha, that their brother is sick. He could go right away, but Jesus acts in his own time and stays where he is for another 2 days. He gets another message that Lazarus has died. Then he goes to Bethany, back to Judea, where people are not happy. The Jewish leadership are not happy. Synagogue and temple elders are not happy with the way Jesus is stirring up crowds. That's why Thomas says, "Let us go also, that we may die with him." Before Jesus gets word about his friend Lazarus in today's passage, he said that he is the good shepherd who lays down his life for his sheep. And that's what he's getting ready to do. So Jesus goes back to Judea, where things are troublesome and where he might not live, where he winds up dying, to console Mary and Martha. He gets there, and Lazarus has been in the tomb for 4 days. He's been in the tomb long enough for his spirit to be completely gone. There's no coming back after 4 days, or so they think. Martha and Mary take their known roles from when Mary anoints Jesus' feet while Martha works. And Martha goes out and confronts Jesus, saying, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." She doesn't care that he's Jesus in the way that we know Jesus. This is her friend who could have saved her brother. She's grieving a loss. "It didn't have to be this way," she says. And Jesus says, "I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this?" She said to him, "Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one coming into the world." We are in the midst of a pandemic, which we all know, and we are finding our way as best we can, including with spectacular failures of technology, trying to do the right thing or to do something a little better. And we're grieving. We're grieving losses that we've already experienced, of not being able to see one another, not being able to hug, not being able to see friends, not being able to socialize, not being able to feast on our Savior's flesh and blood. We're grieving what we have already lost, and we're grieving what we will be experience as lost as we go through Holy Week, our most sacred week as Christians, not gathering and not going through Jesus' life together in person. But we're doing that out of love for our neighbor, despite our grief, knowing that things could be worse if we don't. Martha says to Jesus, "It didn't have to be this way. You could have been here and healed him." As the curve of infections and deaths flattens in Seattle's and elongates, and our peak hopefully is lower, That won't be true in the whole country. And it doesn't have to be that way. Jesus could have healed Lazarus. We can keep ourselves alive. That's why we're here on Twitch today. Why we're gathering digitally. Why we are not having any sort of Palm Sunday car procession or Easter parking lot service. To keep people alive. Because more deaths don't have to happen. Even as she confronts Jesus, Martha says to him, "Even now, I know that God will give you whatever ask of him." And then Jesus and Martha have a back and forth about the resurrection. Certain strains of Judaism in the first century believed in the resurrection at the last day. That's what Martha says. I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day. Jesus moves the resurrection from the last day to the present. I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? She said to him, "Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one coming into the world." Jesus tells Mary that the resurrection is not just at the last day. Today, the church, on the week before we hear the Passion, is making sure there's no paywall and giving away the good news. God, through Jesus, has power over death. And Jesus proves that to Mary and to everyone watching him. When he goes to the tomb, prays out loud so that everyone around hears him praying, and commands Lazarus, "Come out!" And Lazarus is raised from the dead. Just before this passage, Jesus says that he is the good shepherd who lays down his life for his sheep. He comes to Judea knowing that it's dangerous, and Thomas wants to come with him, planning to die with him. Jesus raising someone from the dead is the last straw. That's it for the Jewish leaders who have made their beds with Rome, who are good and comfortable with the empire. Not the whole of the Jewish people, not the religion of Judaism. Individuals who are seeking the world, watching out for themselves, which happens in every religion. Jesus comes to Lazarus to raise him and to lay down his life for his friends. The very next verse after this starts the plot to kill Jesus. We'll hear that passage at morning prayer next week. Look for emails about how you may celebrate with palms, and watch for next week's sermon about why we're hearing the Passion. Because that's what happens next week. We're here today, before Jesus dies, being told he has power over death. All three of our passages give away that good news. If we were having an Easter vigil, we would hear our first passage from Ezekiel then, the Valley of the Dry Bones. So, while we are quarantined, socially distanced, and socially isolated, we have the good news. I said in a post that some of you have seen, although we're not gathering on Easter Day, the Easter Troparion will still be true. We'll still get to sing, "Christ is risen from the dead," trampling down death by death, and to those in the tombs bestowing life. We're quarantined to keep people safe, to keep ourselves safe. More death doesn't have to happen, so we're working to keep it from happening. And in the midst of that, The church is making sure we know, even before we hear of Jesus' death, we know that death is not the end. We grieve when people die. Jesus weeps for his friend. But that's not the end. God, through Jesus, has power over death and the grave. I want to say a word that starts with A, but instead I'll say Amen.